This program is being recorded. So, all right, we will now get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Hernandez Trotter. I am the head of the Reference Department in the Heritage Center here at the Lawrence County Library in Dublin, Georgia. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We are so excited to have Mr. Ron Levi here as we celebrate Family History Month. That's right, October is Family History Month, and it's a time that we always like to celebrate here at the Lawrence County Library. We have a Heritage Center here, and it's a great collection, and we're just so excited to have been able to make connections like the connection today with Mr. Levi. So before we get started with the program, I want to also let everyone know that if you're interested in family history, particularly in this area, we have a monthly meeting, a family history meetup. It's a virtual meetup right now. So people from elsewhere can join us if you're interested in genealogy in the central Georgia area. It's every third Wednesday of the month. And so this month's meeting will be next week, so please feel free to join us. It is also held on Zoom. It is not recorded or broadcasted on Facebook. It's a very casual time just to get together, talk about your challenges and exciting finds regarding genealogy, and you also get to learn about some library resources along the way. Okay, so with all that said, I am very, very honored to welcome Mr. Ron Levi. He is the author of the book, Spitting Image, which we have a circulating copy of at the library if you want to check it out. And he is also co-founder of the Louisa Harvard Foundation, which is dedicated to preserving the history of the Lawrence Hill community. So with all that said, Ron, I'm going to let you take over. I'm putting you in the spotlight. And there you go.
Okay, thank you so much, Christina, and thanks to all of you for joining. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks now, and I'm looking forward to being down in Middle Georgia next week. I'm going to be stopping through Statesboro and Bullock County on my way to home, which is Dublin and Lawrence County for me. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. Today, I'm going to take you through a long presentation, which is why we asked you to mute, because I've been asked to cover DNA research as it relates to genealogy and family research, and also my own experience as it relates to how I was able to reconnect to my ancestral roots in Lawrence County. So our agenda for today is going to cover a lot of things at a very high level. Some of you may be very experienced with genealogy and DNA testing, using those results to fill in your family trees. Others may be very new to it. And no matter how long you've been doing this, you'll find that it can be very addictive. It can be very time consuming. There's a lot of information to digest, and at first glance, it's very off-putting to most people who don't have a lot of experience with that. If you don't have a scientific background, if you're not a geneticist or an MD, it can be very off-putting. But I'll tell you, the easiest thing to do is, as we all heard the adage, eat that elephant one bite at a time. You can just take it a little bit at a time, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give you little bites of a lot of different things. And I'm going to give you the background and the presentation that you can refer to later and go back to and remind yourself and refresh and go back and look at some things. Okay. So the agenda today is communities. There are a lot of communities out there that can help you. How we build trees and what the resources and tools are available for building those trees, for interpreting DNA test results, for testing your DNA, and then for printing and publishing things like trees and charts that help you visualize all of that hard work you're doing. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on the reliability of DNA testing. There are different camps out there that have different feelings about the reliability of DNA testing, especially as it relates to building trees. There are some people, especially who are contacted by folks who've identified a relationship with them, who are surprised. This person's contacted me out of the blue. How reliable is this stuff? And so I'll give you a couple of bullets on that. We'll talk a little bit about DNA fundamentals. This part is going to put those of you who have a lot of experience with DNA testing to sleep a little bit, but I'm going to ask you to keep me honest. If I stray or if I say something wrong, please, by all means, enter in the chat, give me a correction. And when we get to the questions at the end, we'll clean that up. I'll try not to make too many mistakes on that. And I do that by not going too deep because I'm not an expert. We'll talk about deciphering those DNA test results, what they look like. You get a whole bunch of results back when you test your DNA, and there might be thousands of them, literally. How do I know what to do with those thousands of results? How am I related to all these people? And again, I'm only covering 2 or 3 minutes on this, but it should be enough to whet your your taste buds and to give you some resources and references to go back to. Spent a couple of minutes on separating matches into maternal and paternal branches. I think I have a typo there. I said maternal and maternal. I mean maternal and paternal. There's a really easy to use method for anyone. You don't have to be an expert to do it. It's called the Leeds method. And it's the first step in really separating out those DNA matches and then figuring out who's who and how you're related to them. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that does seem very scientific, which is chromosome mapping, but I'm going to talk about it and what it means to you and how even a layperson can use it to make sense of all these matches. Again, only 2 or 3 minutes, okay? Then I'm going to talk about deducing common ancestors from those shared DNA matches. Now, it's one thing to see a census record from 1940 with a list of children and parents attached. It's another thing to make that leap and assume that one of those children is connected to another family in a different enumeration in a neighboring county. DNA can make that connection for you, okay? So doing that logical, deductive reasoning is a part of how we make these connections too. And then finally, I'm going to talk about something a little bit more personal because Christina asked me, okay, let's bring this into Lawrence County and your connection to Lawrence County. What have you learned from DNA testing as it relates to Dublin and Lawrence County? And I think one of the things, there have been lots, first of all. Let me say the one that I think I'd like to talk about today will be the Lowther or Lowther and Hagen connection that really connects Lawrence and Bullock counties both. And then finally, we'll have some links to some other resources if we have time, because I do want to leave about 10 or 15 minutes for questions and answers. So here's where we start going fast, okay? So genetic genealogy. Most people get into DNA testing because they just want to find out about their ethnic origins. You know, I think I'm 25% Irish and 50% German and 25% Polish, and so they're trying to figure that out. And they don't realize that when they do that DNA testing, depending on whether or not their results are public and visible, that they are going to also identify a lot of matches, people that match them genetically. It could be second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and so on, right? But the reason a lot of people start is just to find out what those ethnic origins are. They're pretty reliable, but different services provide results on ethnicities using different tests. So they're not always exactly the same, but they're general. As opposed to autosomal testing, which identifies relationships between people, those are extremely reliable. We'll talk about using DNA to fill in the blanks. A lot of us have blanks in our trees. I mean, it's rare that genealogists and people who are doing they're building their family trees have every single blank filled in. There's that one grandmother who we don't know her parents are. There's that one great-great-grandfather who, I can't believe that's his mother. That can't be his mother. And so using this DNA testing, sometimes if we focus that work and we look in the right areas and we look under the right rocks, we can discover some things that the family, had forgotten or perhaps even never knew. Resolving those mysteries around missing persons in those family trees, and then validating other sources. I mean, there are some times when we've seen things in books or on Find a Grave or other genealogical sites that report something as fact, and we find it to be false through DNA testing. We find the actual truth of it. Right? I'll talk a little bit about a couple of those kinds of examples. And then finally, discovering or reconnecting lost branches. I mean, sometimes, there's, a great aunt who we didn't think had any children, and we discover that, lo and behold, she had 6. And now we've got a whole new branch of our tree. Right? This is a big fire hose. This is a lot of stuff, but it's here for reference, not for you to memorize today. Right, but to understand that we have a community of helpers. There are people out here, an entire subculture of people who are dedicated to helping, not just understanding how DNA works and as it relates to genealogy, but also to helping newer people and novices begin to understand that too. And I am the beneficiary of one of those. And Christine, if you could let that Frances in, that's my cousin. She's like the reason I can do all of this. So on Facebook, these resources often come in the form of groups. So if you were to type on Facebook and you did a search for DNA detectives, you'd see that group. DNA detectives is there to help people who are looking to connect to biological family, right? So they may be adoptees, they may have been fostered or somehow become disconnected from their family. So DNA detectives is there to be a private but very helpful group of essentially search angels. If you want a search angel to help you find something, DNA detectives is the place where those search angels come to help for free. Similarly, foundling finders is very much like DNA detectives, except foundling finders focuses, that's a lot of F's. Foundling Finders focuses on children, infants who were abandoned at birth and have no information on their, or little information on their biological family. That's Foundling Finders. Now, both of those groups require you to answer a few questions. They're private to protect, people's privacy, and they let you in after those questions have been answered. DD Social is an offshoot of DNA Detectives, and DD Social is a great place for anyone doing DNA research, and they help one another. It could be me and Christina and Francis are on there, and we're talking about research that we've done, or we're asking questions about one of the tools that we use. DD Social is great for that. And then there are lots of other ones that are specialized by region. There's a Georgia GEDmatch Ancestors group. There's a group that specializes in all of the testing services, Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA. So all of those things that are out there, right? Then there are the tools or the sites that we use to build trees, which is represented by that green column in the middle. Ancestry, WikiTree, Family Search, MyHeritage are all places where trees are built. And depending on whether or not how serious you are and what you want to spend, you can use one or the other. Ancestry has a subscription-based fee, but they also have a free thing that you can use. The subscription fee allows you to search public records and add those or attach those records to your tree, but you can build a tree for free without that stuff on Ancestry. Likewise, WikiTree is free, Family Search is free. Family Search, which is run by the Latter-day Saints, also lets you to search for records, and I don't believe you need a subscription. I believe that's entirely free. And I believe Lawrence County Library, I think I saw an announcement, is now a Family Search partner, right?
That is correct. We are now a Family Search affiliate library. So once you're connected to our Wi-Fi or in the library itself, you can access their digital resources. Family Search also does have a list of all their affiliate libraries. So for anyone seeing this outside of the Lawrence County area, you can search the website to find a library near you to access those resources.
Awesome. And then GEDmatch is a place where I don't think you would build a tree on GEDmatch, but you can take a tree that you build on Ancestry or Family Search or MyHeritage. You can upload that tree to GEDmatch, and then you can search trees of people who have uploaded their trees to GEDmatch. Maybe they aren't on the same platform. Maybe you're on Ancestry and they were on MyHeritage, but you both upload your trees to GEDmatch, and now you can do some matching. Okay. And then that third column, the darker blue column, that's a list of the sites that either have tools, either do DNA testing or have tools that allow you to perform some sort of analysis on those DNA results. DNA Painter is by far the most amazing tool I've ever seen. And it's got so much information. I'm not going to spend any time explaining all of those tools to you, except to say, visit it one bite at a time, learn a little bit at a time. There are YouTube videos on everything that's on DNA Painter, but it allows you to go down to the chromosomal level, the segment of the chromosome, and identify who that chromosome or who that segment of chromosome came from. It's amazing. The other one's 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Ancestry DNA. Those are the places where you send in your spit in a little tube, and you get your results back, and you discover that you're the great grandchild of a king of England or an emperor, right? And it happens. The last column really is for charting and publishing. These are places where I found they have really cool tools for, for instance, creating a book, a hardcover, glossy, high quality book of images and text and all the things that you found through your searching, your public records, your census records, your marriage certificates, your death certificates, and pictures. All of that stuff can go into a beautifully bound book. They're expensive. They're like $1 a page. So if you have 150 pages, it's $150. But I mean, it's an invaluable family heirloom if you can do that. And then the one on the bottom is just an example. That little circle chart is an example from a company called Family Tree chart. And it's just a really nice example that allows you to put many, like up to 5 or 6 generations in a single chart. We're used to seeing those charts that get really wide or get really tall. And the circle chart allows you to represent a lot more people in a smaller space, basically. All right. So DNA fundamentals. DNA fundamentals, we all have 23 chromosomes, okay? And we have 22 that are called autosomes, 22 pairs that are autosomes. And we have 1 pair that are sex chromosomes, the X and the Y, okay? Girls have 2 X chromosomes, Boys have one X and one Y. Okay. DNA, there are three, essentially, that I know of, three primary kinds of DNA tests. There's a Y DNA test, and there's an MT or mitochondrial DNA test, and there's an autosomal DNA test. Okay. The Y DNA test tells you your patrilineal path, your father's 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 father. The mitochondrial DNA test tells you your mother's mother's mother. But what about all those people in the middle? What about all those aunts and uncles and cousins? That's your autosomal test. That's what gives you those kinds of results. Okay. So if you're struggling with, where is my, my original father thousands and thousands of years ago, where did that person come from? Do a Y DNA test if you're a male. I'm not sure about females on that one. And if you want to know where your mother's mother came from, Eve, on that side, do a mitochondrial DNA test. But if you want to know, how you're related to someone in Detroit who has lived in the most recent, century, then you want to do the autosomal test. And if you want to hide from someone who's in Detroit, do not do an autosomal test, or make sure your results are private, because one of the things I say in my book is that, privacy is an illusion in the 21st century. I mean, anybody that has a few bucks and enough time on their hands can find out anything they want about you on the internet. So it is what it is, right? Genetic distance. The other thing I want to mention here is that how closely related we are to someone is basically how many segments and how large the segments are that we share with them. So twins, we each get 50% of our DNA from our father and 50% from our mother. Twins get the exact same 50%. Okay, identical twins get the exact same 50%. All other siblings get a mix and match, a portion of that 50%. They're not the exact same 50%, the exact same segments. Okay. Twins, other than they still get 50 from mom and 50 from dad. So, and you share about 50% with mom and 50% with dad, and identical twins share 100 with each other. That's what it is, right? And then other siblings, they share about roughly 50. It could be less than 50, 40, 60 for fraternal or non-identical twins. Okay. We'll talk about shared matches in the Leeds method. How do we get all these thousands of shared matches from Ancestry? How do we go about sorting them out? How do we know which ones are mothers, our mother's ancestors, or our mothers related to us on our mother's side? How do we decide which ones are related to us on our father's side? Right. And I'm going to talk about chromosomal mapping. The thing I want to say here is that if two people, and I think I may have another slide on this, share the exact same segment on the exact same chromosome, let's say I share from 1.0 to 2.0 on chromosome 1 with Christina. We know for a fact that she and I got that segment of that little segment of that big chromosome from the exact same ancestor. Could be close, it could be recent, or it could be far back. How close it is or how far back it is, we can tell by how big that segment is. The larger the segment, the closer we are related. The smaller the segment, the further back that is. Can I have a couple of things that will illustrate that for you? This is just a representation, again, of the difference between mitochondrial DNA tests and then Y DNA tests, which are blue. And then everything in the middle, green, that's your autosomal test. Okay, so one is maternal or matrilineal, the other is patrilineal, and then the other is in between. Okay. So mtDNA or mitochondrial DNA and Y DNA allow us to differentiate and separate out. Autosomal DNA allows us to bridge and figure out how the two overlap or are related to one another. Okay, in a nutshell. I'm sure there is a geneticist who will correct me on that somewhere, but that's how I understand it. Here's a chart that shows you, okay, so you get these matches, and it's important to understand these centimorgans. So I just showed you this chart of all these little chromosomes, and I told you it depends on how big they are and how many of them we share. That determines how closely related we are, right? There actually is, it's quantified. There's a measure for each one of these, and the unit of measure is called a centimorgan. centimorga, centimorgan. The bigger the centimorgans are and the more of them we share, the more closely related we are. So here's an example of one of my paternal relatives with whom Ancestry says I share 883 centimorgans. So there's a chart called the DNA Detectives Autosomal Statistics chart. You can search for this on the web, or you can just pull up this presentation anytime later after we get done here. And you can always go look at your ancestry results. And it doesn't have to be ancestry. It could be family tree DNA or 23andMe or any of the others. You're going to find this number and followed by the letters CM, 883 centimorgans across 34 segments. All right. I go to the chart and I look for the range. Where does 883 fall? 883 falls between 575 and 1330. So this person is probably my first cousin. Could potentially be a half aunt, a great grandparent, or a great grandchild. But if this person is the same age as me, as I think that's the right way to say that, probably not my great grandparent. Possible, but probably not. So you have to be careful not to make too many assumptions. Just because someone's older than you or by a generation or two doesn't mean they're not your first cousin. It's still possible because of the range of ages and generations. Okay, but most likely, and this person did turn out to be my first cousin. Okay, so in this case, and usually the fewer centimorgans you share, the fewer segments you share. So when I get down to someone that I share, let's say 20 centimorgans with, chances are it's only on 1 or 2 segments. Okay, so again, the size of the segment and the number of segments tells us a lot. It tells us how close genetically we are, and it tells us how far away that recent ancestor was. Here's an example, same thing, using a different method. So instead of going to a chart, a reference chart, to look up that number in a range, I'm going to a tool called DNA Painter. Remember on that first slide I showed you, I said DNA Painter is the best tool since sliced bread, right? One of the tools on DNA Painter is called the shared centimorgan tool. And you just enter in the number and it tells you, what the chances are and how likely this person is related to. So in this case, Susan, it turned out to be my half sister. Long story, read the book. Susan's my half sister, right? So I got her to test and we shared 1,471 centimorgans. Now, full siblings would share almost twice that, about 24 to 2,600 centimorgans. I type in 1471 at dnapainter.com/tools, and it tells me 96% chance this is your half sibling. Could be your grandparent. She's not old enough for that. Could be your aunt or uncle. That's a possibility. It turns out she was my half sibling. So now I have 2 people. I have one on my paternal side who I know is a paternal relative, and I have one on my maternal side who I know is a maternal relative. So you can do some deductive reasoning from that and say everybody who's related to Susan is probably on my mother's side. Everybody who's related to SM is probably on my paternal side, right? And if I ever find any that are related to both, I got to rethink something. Okay. So here is the manual way of doing that. So this method of separating out your paternals from your maternals is called the Leeds method. And it doesn't really matter which tool you use to do it. It was named after the person who discovered it or who thought it up, I think. And basically it says, you take those numbers I gave you, like the centimorgans, whether it's 883 like I had for Michael, or whether it's 1471 for Susan, and you plug it in here and you can start to separate. Now it says you should start at 400 or less. So in the previous 2 examples, they're too high because we share more than one grandparent with people that are above 400 centimorgans. Right? But at 400 and down, you're looking at probably just one grandparent you share with that person. Okay. Or basically what we're saying is you probably share a great-great-grandparent with that person or a great-grandparent with that person. Right? So it's kind of a way of separating out those branches. There is a lot more detail on this. If you Google Leeds method, a lot of different sites there, they're all very consistent in how they describe this, probably much better than I'm doing. But on the left in the screen in front of you here, you'll see a spreadsheet, and it's just a manual way I've listed, or this example lists, 15 people whose matches range between 400 and 100. Okay, and then the user looks at Dorothy in their matches and says, who else does Dorothy match? Dorothy doesn't match Sam. Dorothy doesn't match Betsy. Dorothy does match Rudy. So they assign a color. Okay, everybody who matches Dorothy is blue. Dorothy, Rudy, Shelley, Walter, and Hazel are all blue. And then they do it for the next person. In this case, it's Sam, because Sam didn't match Dorothy. Okay, who does Sam match? Sam doesn't match Rudy or Shelley, but Sam does match Jonathan. So everybody who matches Sam, we're going to do yellow. That's the manual way of doing this. And the point of it is, you may not know who that common ancestor is, but when you start to develop patterns and you start to realize that each one of these columns, because we chose that range of 400 to 100 centimorgans, it probably represents a grandparent. One's maternal, one's paternal, one's maternal, one's paternal, because we each have 4 grandparents. So chances are all those guys are for one, and so on. Now, another way to do this automatically, which I love about Ancestry, this isn't really available on 23andMe or the others, is using the concept of groups on Ancestry that they've introduced. It allows you to assign a color, just like in the leaves method. Okay, so in Ancestry, I can look at my first match there, Vivian. I know that she's a paternal match. And after I do a little bit of research and I've done some triangulation, I've determined that Vivian is related to me multiple times. Look at the number of centimorgans, 344, but she and I are related in multiple ways. There are multiples here. A better example would be Mark. So Mark is only related to me on my mother's side at 327 centimorgans. Okay, and then John, coincidentally, they have the same last name, so that makes it easy, is also related. And they only share one name with me that's common to them and me, and that happens to be their surname. Right? So these two guys are my second cousins, and I think they may be brothers, actually, or first cousins to one another. Okay, so by clicking these little boxes, and when you first start with grouping in Ancestry, there are no names here, they're just colors. So it allows you to customize this. So once I knew how I was related to Mark and John, I made pink because it's maternal. I just chose pink, that's what I wanted to associate it. And everybody who matches them both now, I can start turning pink. I can just click the pink box and I can type in the name using the edit button here, Capilla, K-I-P-I-L-L-A. So now when I do my shared matches, I click on shared matches in Ancestry, and then everybody who matches Mark, I make pink. And that's exactly the same thing that we did here manually in a spreadsheet. Okay. This tells you everything I just said, so I'm going to skip it. But if you look at this and you can't make sense of it, then look at the steps here, same steps I just said. Okay. There's another thing I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, which is auto clustering. It's a really cool program, but I used it after I had figured out a lot of things. I didn't use it before, but I understand a lot of people use it before. If you've got all these matches and you're using GEDmatch, or you're using one of the other tools like MyHeritage and 23andMe, they have these options or these things called auto clustering, which basically it takes all of those folks and it groups them together into groups of common ancestry. So it says everybody up here, for example, in the purple block are related to one another. Everybody here in the middle block who are orange are related to one another, and so on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but I will tell you this on GEDmatch. So GEDmatch has some tools which are free. It's gedmatch.com. Some people call it GEDmatch, GEDMATCH.com. Here you go there. A lot of tools are free, super tool, but some of the tools you have to pay a subscription for. It's not a lot. It's like $10 a month. This particular tool, auto clustering on GEDmatch, is part of that paid set. So if you pay $10, you get a whole bunch of tools, plus you get this one. On MyHeritage, on the other hand, myheritage.com, it's free. Okay, and it's a very good one too. So you can use either of those for that. Won't spend a lot of time. Here's an example that I want to show you all because it's related to both Lawrence County and my ancestry in Dublin. And it also illustrates what I was telling you before about the length of these segments, these shared segments, and about if they overlap, you share them with the same ancestor. Okay, so here's an example using chromosome mapping. This is chromosome number 12, and the tool I'm using here is DNA Painter, right? So DNApainter.com. And when I begin to paste these maps in, you basically go to GEDmatch or you go to 23andMe and you copy out your chromosome of matching of the person that you match. You copy out those chromosomes that match, and then you paste them in here into DNA Painter. I won't show you how to do it. It'll take forever, but it's not hard. Okay, you paste them in there, and there are lots of videos on YouTube on it. And when you do, it starts to build these, individual bars on your chromosome to show you which segment you share. So on chromosome number 12, I share this segment. If you look down to Jackie, which I have an arrow next to the green arrow, Jackie and I share a pretty long segment there. And all that means to me is that I know how I relate to Jackie, and Jackie and I are related via the Lothar or Lowther, depending on what part of Georgia or North Carolina you're from. And we know that we have the same second great grandparent. Okay, so I know that I inherited that from my grandparent, and she inherited it from her great grandparent. So that makes us second cousins once removed. And this is how long a segment is. This little purple bar at the top here next to Jackie's name is for second cousin once removed. Now the one below that, Judy Martin, DRT1, Hannah Akins, are also Lothar or Hagens, but they're more removed, they're more distant. We share a third great grandparent or a fourth great grandparent. And if you keep going down to Faye Thomas and Rose Adams, it's even further back. It's a fourth grandparent or a fifth great grandparent, right? But the point is, I got the segment that Marshall Bruton has there from, let's say, a fourth great grandparent. I got the segment that Renee Atkins has from a third great grandparent, but they're all in the same line. They're all coming from that same distant ancestor, which was Rose Adams' match, right? I hope that makes sense. So looking up here in the upper right corner of the chart with the green boxes and the blue one, it says Mary Hagen and John Lothar. So Gertrude Lothar is my grandmother. Thomas is Jackie's great grandfather. So her great grandfather and my great grandmother were, did I get that right? I better ask my cousin Francis, who I'll introduce you to in a minute on this. And then, yeah, William is my great grandfather, and he's her second great grandfather, I think. Right? And it goes back. So each one of these segments that we share here gets smaller and smaller. So if there were a cousin and Edward was our only shared ancestor, the segment that we share would be small, but it would still be in the same line and layered on top of this longer one with Jackie. Okay. All right, let's move forward. Cousins. There's a lot of confusion, maybe not among many of you who are experienced, but there's a lot of confusion about what's the difference between a first cousin and first cousin removed. I mean, my second cousin twice removed, what is that and what does it mean to me? This chart is just a reference that helps you do that, right? So we share a grandparent with our first cousins. So if I am in the white box and Christina is my first cousin, let's say in the yellow box to the right of my self box, then she and I share a grandparent. Why is this helpful? Because you're going to see in these centimorgans, if it's 443 or 833 centimorgans, and this person is your first cousin, and you don't know who your grandparents are, if you were adopted or you were a foundling, one thing you know for sure is that person's grandparent is your grandparent. One of them, one of those four is yours. That's how this deductive reasoning begins. So if A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. That's proof positive. So sometimes when there aren't any public documents, there's no census, there's no marriage certificate, there's no death certificate. Sometimes this is the only way, and this is often even better or more reliable than any public record. Sometimes it contradicts public records, and that's where skeletons come from. All right, here's a good example of this. Okay, so an example was before I came along and started messing around in people's closets. We believed, or my cousins believed, that our William A. Lothar, who was born in Dublin, in Lawrence County, was the son of William Lothar, who was of the Lothar Hall in Jones County, Georgia. Okay. We had seen pictures, and my cousin Francis Stevens. So this is a good time for me to segue with Francis. Francis, I believe, I hope, is listening. And Francis was one of the first DNA matches that I contacted. As a foundling, I was abandoned at birth, shortly after birth at a hospital in Detroit. Right? I was adopted into a great family, and I learned around 10 years old that I was adopted, and I didn't really have an urge to really start digging and looking until I began having children. And then I wanted to know more about the part of them that I couldn't tell them about, their medical history, their ancestry, their heritage. Right? So I began did the DNA testing, and one of the first folks that I matched was Francis. And Francis was a little bit hard to get in touch with at first. I won't spill all the beans here on this call, but the bottom line is her family. She knows everything about her family from Dublin, our family from Dublin. And she was so warm and willing to share with me everything she knew. And so I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of a giant. I didn't make all this stuff up. Francis did. Francis has been to your library way more times than I have. She's been to the courthouses, and she's walked the streets, and some of her shoe leather is still down in those courthouses and at the Historical Society. All right, it's still there. But because she did all that, I was able to build on it, and I was able to find things, and in this case is an example of one that was going to be altered. So we thought William was, the father of our William A. William A. Lothar was born in slavery, and we thought that William Lothar of Jones County was the man who owned him and his children. Right? DNA testing, though, revealed something a little bit different, a little bit strange, and this is probably a good time for me to read just a couple of paragraphs from my book. How are we doing on time? 3:05. We're going till 3:30, right? Chapter 26, Kingdom. Okay. I was amazed by Francis's memory. Much of the information she documented had been committed to memory, and she rattled it off as if I were capable of assimilating in minutes what took her years to construct. I did not complain. I did my best to keep up, and her patience knew no bounds. She explained how little was known of the origin of Sarah, William's mother. We knew that Sarah was a first-generation African, but we didn't know the country of her origin, her language, customs, or anything more. Frances showed me photos of Lothar Hall in Jones County, Georgia. She explained that the home was destroyed by fire in 1942. I was saddened that I would never be able to visit, but thankful that pictures survived. The home was built by Samuel Lothar of Virginia, who settled there with his wife, Anne Sophia Pepper, after their marriage in 1814. The photographs in the Library of Congress show a home with a graceful white winding staircase with cherry treads and railings. I imagine what life must have been like for William and his siblings as children of Samuel. Frances even had a picture of a white William, the son of Samuel and Anne Sophia, born in 1816 in Warren, Georgia. I was captivated and conflicted by the thought that this William owned my second great-grandmother, Sarah, from Africa, and fathered her son, William A. Lothar. How did he acquire her? Was he unusually cruel to her? As I built out the Lothar DNA matches of Frances and my cousins, however, the name Hagen appeared with increasing frequency. Dozens of DNA matches were all converging on the names of John Lothar and Mary Hagen of Bullock County, Georgia. Like a great ship emerging from the fog of generations on a sea of silence, it became clear that the father of William A. Lothar was not William, the son of Samuel. The man who bought Sarah of Africa and fathered her children, William, Edgar, Andrew, Telly, Richard, and Susan, was John Lothar Jr., the son of John Lothar and Mary Hagen, who lived in Bullock County. Once again, DNA was informing and correcting our understanding of ourselves. The photo we had of Samuel was that of our fifth cousin 4 times removed, it turned out. Months later, I would discover a new photo, the headstone of my true third great-grandfather, John, in the old Dublin Cemetery of historic Lawrence County. So if y'all want to go by there today, old Dublin Cemetery, look up John Lothar, say hello. I'm coming next week, and I plan to say a prayer there and pay respects.
This is blooming good.
Is that Brian? So the Lothars and the Harvards. So this is where we were before that passage you just saw in the book, right? We knew William was the father of Vera and Gertrude, my grandmother, and Frances's grandmother is Vera, who was my grandmother's sister. Okay, but we thought his father was Samuel. As I just explained to you, because of the Hagen connections, we could easily prove, and I'll show you in the next slide, how many matches we had that all tied back to John Lothar and Mary Hagen of Bullock County. Okay. Our Harvard connections are here too. I'll mention maybe, I was going to tell you a little bit about Carol Carswell Stewart, who is our Harvard ancestor, because Lawrence Hill is the Harvard home in Lawrence County in Montrose. But this is just a peek at how this stuff shakes out. So you get in the purple here at the bottom are all of my DNA, not all, a lot of my DNA matches. And as I begin to build their trees or look at the trees they had already built, some of them go back pretty far. Like this particular person, Holly, I think her tree went all the way back to Thomas Mickle and Sarah Deal. No Lothar, no Hagen, right? That happens a lot. People have holes in their trees, but through the magic of ancestry, if you have an account, they do those little leaves that kind of wave at you and tell you you have a hint, right? And then you click on it and you realize, oh, you know, Thomas's parents were Catherine Lothar and John Mickle. There it is, there's a Lothar. And so you do that with each one of these in purple, Samuel, Barbara, JD, Mary, and you trace them back and they all of a sudden all start going to the same person. You find these common matches. So Catherine and John, Catherine Lothar and John Mickle, Catherine was the daughter of John and Mary Hagen. Boom. Well, guess what? John Lothar, who is at the Dublin Cemetery, the old cemetery in Dublin, was her brother. John and Catherine were siblings. Their parents were John and Mary Hagen. Okay, now here under David Brantley and under Gertrude, there's just one name. We have dozens, like maybe even scores of relatives who are descendants of William and Amelia. Okay, so William Lothar married Amelia Harvard. Amelia was born in 1847 at Lawrence Hill on Highway 26 and Lawrence Hill Church Road. Okay, and her father was David Harvard, who was the first postmaster of Lawrence Hill. And she married William Lothar, who we've just talked about. All right, and they have hundreds of descendants. I can't even put them all in one page here. Right? And then the same is true over here. So even though John and Catherine also had a sister named Selety, the spelling is different every time I look at it. Celity, Selety, lots of different ways. But again, a lot of these descendants, Stephanie, Reuben, and others, are all related to us in the same way via John Lothar and Mary Hagan of Bullock County. Okay, we are at 3:11. I think I'm going to be done with this by 3:15, and then we'll leave that last 15 minutes for questions to everything. In case you wonder what these people look like, unbelievably, there are pictures. And again, Francis, I mean, you have to read the book, or we have to do another call so I can tell you how much I love Francis and how much I appreciate it. But here's a picture of our William, our ancestor, William A. Lothar, born in about 1860-ish maybe. And his sister, his half-sister, I'm sorry, Martha. Okay, so the parent, John Lothar, who was the son of Mary Hagan and John Lothar of Bullock County, is John Lothar, who was buried at the Old Dublin Cemetery. His slave, Sarah, or servant, depending on which way you want to go, had children, and William was one. With his wife, Sarah Moore, he had children. One was Martha. So Martha and William are half siblings. And that's why when we look at the DNA of the Stanleys are related to the Lothars, and there's no way that I and my cousins would be related to the Stanleys if it weren't for these connections. That's the power of that deductive reasoning. So when I go, there's also a chapter here about the ditch. You all know the Stanley Cemetery, the ditch, not in Dublin. There's a story it's unbelievable to be in that place, not having known the history of the area, to be standing in the ditch and to be in the area which they call the burial ground of the slaves, and then to look up and to see the Stanleys, and then to walk up there and realize you're related to all of them. I've never been in the cemetery where I was biologically related to everybody in the place, which was a really cool moment for me. So that's there. Here is the John Lothar that's buried at Old Dublin Cemetery. This is his headstone. Died June 29th, 1852. Nice epitaph there for him. I have not seen this one in person yet. I am going to be visiting that on this trip next week. Hopefully the weather will be okay. This is Lawrence Hill. This is the home that still stands thanks to the Porters and others who have owned the house since the Harvards left back in probably the late 1800s. I think it's changed hands 2 or 3 times. Again, thanks to Frances. Frances knew all about this house before I ever came into the picture, and she showed it to me and told me the stories of it and how Amelia played there in the house as a servant. On the left here, you'll see the Harvard Family Cemetery, which is directly across kitty corner from the home, from the Lawrence Hill home. And you can see how overgrown it is. But in this picture at the bottom right, you'll see the same obelisk. And in the background behind that obelisk, you see that White House. So that kind of gives you a sense for what it is. So that obelisk in the picture on the bottom right is at the intersection of Highway 26 and Lawrence Hill Church Road. On the left is the cemetery, and on the right is the home. And then Lawrence Hill Church, which, go back one. And Lawrence Hill Church, this is at least the second incarnation of Lawrence Hill Church. David Harvard is listed on his headstone as one of the founders or builders of Lawrence Hill Church. And William Lothar, our ancestor, was the manpower behind building that first church. That first church was built at Rocky Creek, where it intersects Highway 26. So as you're going down Highway 26, you pass Lawrence Hill, and then right as you're going over that bridge on Rocky Creek, somewhere right in there was the first Lawrence Hill Church, which they had to, demolish and then recreate another one there. So that's the end of my presentation. Right at 45 minutes, I have some links here. I'll leave it and then I'll open it up for questions. And I want to give Frances a chance. I want to introduce her and I want to hear her voice because I love her so much. Links link to my website, ronaldlevi.com. My Facebook link is there. And then links to our other related websites like louisaharbor.org, which was founded, it's a nonprofit, Georgia corporation, 501c, and the purpose is to collect funds and to administer the conservation and preservation of those cemeteries. So we have the Harvard Family Cemetery that you saw there in the pictures. We also have a cemetery where servants are laid to rest, which is called the Lawrence Hill Church Cemetery. They go through various states of disrepair over the months with the changing of seasons. Somebody's not always out there caring for them, and we would love to change that. So if you all, this is your history too. This is Middle Georgia. This is Lawrence County. This is Dublin, Montrose, Dudley. If you all can find it in your hearts to donate anything, it's tax deductible, and it'll be used 100% to keep those things beautiful and to be dignified for those who are laid to rest there. Facebook page for Louisa Harvard, Facebook page for the Harvard Family Cemetery if you'd like to see pictures of the people that are laid to rest there, the headstones. Same for the Lawrence Hill Cemetery. And then finally, I also want to draw attention to a cause. As a child that was a foundling that was abandoned at birth, it's been an important cause to me. I realize how blessed I am to have found my biological family and to have had pretty good adoptive family too, and just a wonderful mother. But a lot of children are not so fortunate. A lot of mothers are going through difficult times. A lot of children are abandoned and never found, or they are abandoned in unsafe places. And the National Safe Haven Alliance specializes in making sure that laws like the Baby Moses laws, or called safe haven laws, are available so that mothers can drop off a child, an unharmed, safe child, without any questions asked at a safe haven like a fire station or police station, and the child will be cared for. So I want to get that word out and let you know that the book, this was a labor of love. I did it because I had to do it, not to make money. If it does make a profit, when it does, I will be donating a portion of those proceeds to two causes. Number one, the Louisa Harvard Foundation, because we want to preserve those cemeteries. And number two, the National Safe Haven Alliance. This is not to make me rich. I have a job, and hopefully, God willing, I'll keep it. Right. With that, I also want to ask you to be aware of ways to help. Right? There's ways that you can donate directly. You can definitely help by sharing my story and my links on your social media accounts and on your web pages. You can ask me to speak or present at any of your organization's activities. I'd be happy to do that. I'm going a little bit long, and I thank you so much for your time. If we have time, Christina, let's let Frances say hello. I just want to hear her voice if she's still on.
Okay, well, Frances, I'll let Frances decide if she would like to speak now before we end the recording, or if she wants to go be live on Facebook, because we do have some people on Facebook and we had a question. So Frances, if you want to speak up now, you can, or you can wait and we understand, because not wrong. Let me go ahead and ask you this question. On Facebook, someone asked, what are some of the better newspaper archive sites available online? Did you find yourself relying on newspaper archives?
No, I did not find any free ones. Newspapers.com was good, and I did use it on occasion when I was super hungry for information and I wasn't finding anything. And I kind of bit the bullet and did a short-term subscription for newspapers.com. It was pretty helpful. I also found that a lot of the things I was looking for, well, maybe not a lot, some of the things that I was looking for on newspapers.com was also available on Ancestry and on Family Search. Because a lot of times what people will do, people with subscriptions will copy the documents or the newspaper article, and they'll attach it as a story in their Ancestry profile record. And so they're essentially sharing it that way. So I didn't think it was that much value for me at the time.
That's great. I'll go ahead and add, for people interested in local newspapers, we have digitized our microfilm. So we have access to the digital, database of the Courier Herald from 1901 to 2008. But you do have to come into the library to view it. It is because of copyright restrictions. But we do have that, and it's great to have keyword searchable newspaper access. I will also point out that the Digital Library of Georgia has a great collection of historic newspapers of Georgia. And in fact, they have some of the early what was called Dublin Times Post, the pre-Courier Herald. And that's freely available online. So definitely I recommend Digital Library of Georgia for historic newspapers. And yeah, and then of course, we would love to be able to offer newspapers.com because it is a great resource. Unfortunately, it's an expensive resource for a library to offer. But it does have a lot of good content on there. We also offer, I will say, we have the Macon Telegraph and Atlanta Journal that does have, that's available through the news library. That is available online. Contact us for the username and password, because I'm not be able to broadcast it live right now. But if you can reach out to, just give us a call at the library or email info@ocrl.org. That's info@ocrl.org. And we'll be happy to share the information on how to access Macon Telegraph and AJC from home. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up the recording and the broadcast on Facebook? No. Someone says great presentation. Thank you so much, Ron. So,
Thank you all
and
for
yes,
having me.
thank you very much. All right, everyone. Well, with all that, we'll go ahead and stop the recording, and we will end the live feed. So give us 1 second, then we'll do that.
Thank you all. Thanks,
On
Christina.
Facebook.
Thanks, Ms. Brown.
All right. All right, great. So I think it is official.